My wife stood beside my coffin and cried harder than anyone else. She held a white rose in her trembling hands, wiped tears from her face, and accepted condolences from friends, neighbors, and relatives. Everyone believed I was dead. The priest believed it. The police believed it. My family believed it. And my wife looked absolutely devastated. But there was just one problem. I was still alive, and as I watched my own funeral from less than 50 feet away, hidden inside a parked van across the street, I realized something that changed my life forever. Because the woman who was mourning me was the same woman who had tried to make sure I never came home. For most of my life, I believed I had a happy marriage. My name is Daniel, and for 12 years, my wife Sarah and I built what looked like the perfect life. We had a beautiful house, 2 children, a decent savings account, family vacations every summer. From the outside, we were exactly the kind of couple people envied. Sure, we argued sometimes. Every married couple does. But nothing ever seemed serious enough to make me question our future. At least not until 6 months before my funeral. That's when strange things started happening. Small things at first. Things that were easy to ignore. Sarah suddenly became protective of her phone. She started taking calls in another room. She changed passwords on accounts we used to share. And whenever I asked if something was wrong, she would smile and tell me I was imagining things. I wanted to believe her. So I did. But deep down, something felt off. Then one evening, everything changed. I was working late when I received a call from my bank. The representative sounded confused. She asked if I had authorized a large transfer from one of my investment accounts. I hadn't. The amount was nearly $60,000. I immediately froze. When I checked the account, I discovered the transfer had already gone through. The destination account belonged to someone I didn't recognize. I contacted the bank's fraud department, and that investigation led to a shocking discovery. The transfer hadn't been made by a stranger. It had been made using credentials from inside my own home. Someone had access to my personal information. Someone close to me. Someone I trusted. A few weeks later, I hired a private investigator. I didn't tell Sarah. I needed answers before making accusations. The investigator worked quietly. He tracked financial records, phone logs, email activity, and after a month, he called me with news. News that shattered everything. Sarah wasn't just hiding something. She was having an affair, for nearly a year, with a man named Kevin. But the affair wasn't the worst part. The worst part was what came next. Because Kevin wasn't just her boyfriend. He was helping her move money. My money. Our money. Thousands of dollars had been transferred into accounts connected to him. Together, they were building a future. A future that didn't include me. I felt sick, angry, humiliated. But I didn't confront her. Not yet. Instead, I kept digging. And the deeper I looked, the darker the truth became. One afternoon, the investigator handed me a folder. Inside were copies of messages exchanged between Sarah and Kevin. Most were exactly what you'd expect. Romantic conversations, plans for secret meetings, discussions about money. But then I found one message. One sentence. A sentence I'll never forget. It read, "Everything will be easier once he's gone." At first, I assumed they meant divorce. But the next messages suggested something much worse. They talked about insurance policies, assets, inheritance, and timing. That's when fear replaced anger. I wasn't dealing with a cheating spouse anymore. I was dealing with someone who viewed me as an obstacle. I immediately contacted authorities. Unfortunately, suspicion isn't proof. The messages were disturbing, but they weren't enough. Police advised me to be careful, to document everything, and to stay alert. For several weeks, nothing happened. Then one rainy Friday night, I almost died. I was driving home from work when a truck suddenly crossed into my lane. The impact sent my car spinning into a ditch. The vehicle was destroyed. Witnesses assumed nobody could survive, but fate had other plans. I was severely injured, broken ribs, a concussion, several fractures, yet somehow I lived. Barely. The strange part came afterward. The truck driver disappeared. No trace, no explanation. And investigators soon discovered the truck had been stolen. That's when the police began looking at my case differently. Because the crash no longer looked accidental. It looked deliberate. For my own safety, authorities proposed something unusual. Something straight out of a movie. They wanted me hidden. Completely hidden. While they investigated, the official story would be simple. Daniel Parker died from injuries sustained in the crash. The death would be announced publicly. Funeral arrangements would proceed, and anyone involved in planning harm against me would believe their goal had been achieved. I agreed, not because I wanted revenge, because I wanted the truth. The day of my funeral arrived 3 weeks later. I sat inside an unmarked surveillance van. Several investigators sat with me. Cameras were positioned around the cemetery. Every conversation mattered. Every reaction mattered. I wasn't prepared for what I saw. People showed up from every chapter of my life. Old friends, co-workers, family members, neighbors. Many were genuinely heartbroken. Watching them mourn was harder than I expected. I wanted to tell them I was alive. I wanted to step out and hug them. But I stayed hidden. Then Sarah arrived, dressed entirely in black. Her eyes red, her expression shattered. She looked like a widow consumed by grief. If I hadn't known the truth, I would have believed every second of it. Everyone did. They embraced her, comforted her, praised her strength, and she played the role perfectly. But cameras don't just capture faces. They capture moments, details, truth. About 40 minutes into the service, Sarah stepped away from the crowd. She walked toward a secluded area behind a row of trees. A few minutes later, Kevin arrived. The investigators immediately focused cameras on them. They thought nobody could hear. Nobody could see. They were wrong, because hidden microphones picked up everything. And what they said changed the entire case. Kevin asked if everything was finally settled. Sarah smiled, actually smiled, at my funeral. Then she replied, "It's over. We can finally move on. No tears, no grief, no sadness, just relief. Cold, unmistakable relief." They began discussing insurance payouts, property ownership, financial transfers, future plans, and then came the most important statement of all. Kevin laughed and said, "I still can't believe the crash worked." The van went silent. Every investigator looked at each other, because that sentence connected everything. The affair, the money, the messages, the accident, all of it. The funeral continued. Neither Sarah nor Kevin knew their words had been recorded. Neither realized the investigation had just reached a turning point. For the next several days, authorities gathered additional evidence. Bank records, phone data, witness testimony. The case became stronger and stronger. Eventually, both were brought in for questioning. At first, they denied everything. Then their stories started changing. Then they started blaming each other. And finally, the truth emerged. The crash hadn't been random. The truck driver had been hired through intermediaries. Money had changed hands. Plans had been discussed. The goal wasn't divorce. It wasn't separation. It was me. A month later, I finally stepped back into public view. The reaction was unbelievable. Some people thought they were seeing a ghost. Others cried. A few actually screamed. My parents hugged me for nearly 10 minutes. My children refused to let go. And Sarah? The look on her face when she saw me alive is something I'll never forget. For the first time in years, there was no performance, no acting, no carefully crafted mask, just pure shock, pure fear, and the realization that her secret was over. Today, years later, people still ask me what it felt like to attend my own funeral. Honestly, it was one of the strangest experiences imaginable. Watching people mourn you changes something inside. You learn who truly loved you, who cared, who showed up, and who was simply pretending. But the biggest lesson wasn't about death. It was about trust. Sometimes the most dangerous people aren't strangers. They're the people sitting across from you at dinner. The people who know your routines, your weaknesses, your dreams. The people you never think to question. I lost a marriage. I lost the life I thought I had. But I gained something more valuable. The truth. And the truth saved my life. Because if I hadn't looked deeper, if I had ignored the warning signs, if I had continued believing the illusion, then my funeral wouldn't have been fake. It would have been real. And my wife would have been standing beside my coffin exactly the same way, holding a white rose, wiping away tears, accepting condolences, while secretly celebrating that I was gone forever. And that's why the day my wife attended my funeral became the day I got my life back.